For 21 years, his naughty antics have kept kids around the world enthralled. Since Horrid Henry first hit the shelves, the series has sold an amazing 21 million books and more, and spawned a cartoon series and even a film. Well, now he's played his final prank as the last ever Horrid Henry goes on sale later this month. I'm delighted to say that the genius behind it all, author Francesca Simon, joins me now. Is that right? Because you sort of laughed then when I said final prank. Is it true? Is it really the final prank?
Yes, I think it is. No, I just laughed because it sounded so final. Because always, you know, when I write them, I'm just sitting in my office writing them, and I'm not thinking of this big picture. Yes, I think for the moment it is. And I was very, very keen to make the last book fantastic, so that I wouldn't, you know, be weeping over the books. Just spilled water over them, but apart from that.
You did in the green room, yeah. We'll gloss over that. When you first sat down to write the first Horrid Henry story, though, did you ever think that it would be 20 million books and counting later?
I think if I had thought that for a moment, I wouldn't have been able to write a word. It would have felt like this massive burden. No, but when I write them, I mean, even writing the last book, I'm not thinking, oh, this is the last book. I've sold millions and millions. How can I keep this up? I'm just thinking, okay, what's happening now? What could Horrid Henry do? Can I use that story idea I had? Wouldn't that be fun? I'm very narrow in my focus.
The world is not narrow. The world has changed enormously since you first started writing. It's worth pointing out that this final book of Horrid Henry stories is dedicated to Joshua Stamp Simon, your son, who you say has somehow grown up while Horrid Henry has forever stayed the same. So how have the stories sort of stayed the same throughout those years while the rest of the world and your son have completely changed?
That's a really good question. I mean, the one thing that's changed is I think when I started, I was talking about tapes. And
Cassettes.
Okay. But the lucky thing is that Tony Ross, being such a clever illustrator, he's always drawn almost like iconic images. So it's always the television set, the CD player, and we've kind of kept those. So we haven't tried, there's no point in trying to keep up with technology. I did get into trouble, I think, once over a fax.
Okay, and have kids always reacted over the years in the same way to the Horrid Henry stories?
Exactly the same way. They have all, well, I think because there's something so universal about sibling rivalry and fighting to the death over who gets the TV remote and who's going to sit behind the driver in the car. And those things just don't change. I mean, as long as there are families and children have siblings, everyone's going to want to have the most attention on them.
I know you were telling me before we came on air that you've saved some stories that you've been dying to tell over the years for this final book, for these final 4. It does beg the question, though, Francesca, once Henry has sort of waved bye-bye with his final prank, if that's the case, what are you going to do next? How do you top Horrid Henry?
Well, I don't know about topping, but I am writing some books for older children. I have a book out next year called The Monstrous Child, which is a first-person story about the Norse goddess of the underworld and her anger and angst, and it's quite funny and quite scary.
Okay, so do you think that will that itch the scratch in the same way that Henry has over the years?
Well, it's an older, hopefully, because all the kids who've read Horrid Henry are always keen. You know, I get letters saying, "What can you write something for older kids?" Or "We've read them all 80,000 times. Please, can you write something longer?" So I have written something longer.